My sister moved into my apartment because her university was conveniently nearby. Given my busy schedule, I didn't get to talk much with her. She usually cooked food for both of us, and we would occasionally chat about how things were working out for her. One day, while I was working in my room, she came in, looking sad, and opened up, crying. She told me how difficult it had been to form friendships and how some people were giving her a hard time. At that time, I was so engrossed in my work that I just sent her off, saying that she should focus more on her studies and not care about other people. After that day, she never talked about her university again. We barely conversed, and I often noticed that she looked a little more down than her usual self. It was also reflected in the food she made. I decided to give her some time, hoping she would turn back to normal. One day, I returned home to a nice dinner. She seemed happy and was humming a song. I was a little relieved looking at her, so I sat down to eat my dinner. When I was going to sleep, she came into my room. It had been a long time since we spoke, but she finally opened up and said, "I've made a friend. And, we were planning on going out tomorrow." I was a little surprised and hesitant, but looking at how happy she was, I decided to let her go. I didn't ask her much about the person since I was really tired and already in bed. The next day, when I returned home, I saw there wasn't any food on the table. I tried calling out to her, but I remembered she had gone out. I checked my phone to see if she had called or left any messages, as she wasn't the type to go out for so long without informing anyone. I waited for a little while, but since there wasn't any message from her, I decided to check her location. She seemed to be nearby, just 2 houses away in a nearby park, but she wasn't moving. I got out of my bike and went to get her. When I reached there, I saw her on a swing. She wasn't swinging. She just sat there. Something was weird about her. Her eyes were red. She was staring at something, and she didn't blink. "Hey, Ria, what are you doing over here?" I asked, a little angry and concerned at the same time. She didn't reply. She just stared. I didn't know what was wrong with her, but she looked unharmed. I asked her to sit on the bike, and she did as she was told. We got back home, but her behavior was weird. She stopped cooking food. She would go out early and come back late, and her appetite had grown significantly. She was consuming food enough for 2 people, and it freaked me out. I asked my parents if something had happened while I had been away, and they said they didn't notice anything unusual. I was considering consulting a doctor, but suddenly her behavior turned normal. She went to university in the morning as usual and started preparing dinner again. I was relieved and didn't think much about it. We didn't get to talk much, but she seemed normal again, and I was happy to get back to my work. However, one thing stood out. She was only making burgers. It was fine for a few days, but soon I got tired of eating them. On the 7th day, I decided to ask her if she wanted to go out for dinner. I also saw this as a chance to finally talk to her and catch up. She didn't respond. It seemed as if she was sleeping. I decided not to disturb her and went to take a bath. As the water fell from the shower, I was repulsed. A revolting stench came from the water. As I wiped off the water from my face, I was terrified. I was covered in blood. I screamed, and suddenly I heard her footsteps. She came running, and I heard her voice after so many days. "What happened, Ryan?" she said. I didn't respond. "Oh, come on, it's only a little blood. Why are you so scared? Open up." I got away from the shower to open the door, but I stopped. How did she know about the blood? I shot away from the door to the corner of the bathroom. Suddenly, her calm voice became more aggressive. She started shouting and howling. "Open it! Open it! Open it! Why won't you open? I'm your sister. Why won't you talk to me? Open it, Ryan." Suddenly, she stopped. I didn't move. I remained glued to the wall. Thud. I was alarmed. The door almost came off. She was hammering the door, and I heard a hinge break, and my heart sank. I didn't think twice. I wrapped my towel around my hand and punched the window harder and harder until it was completely shattered. The window was small, and I tore through my flesh as I tried to pass through it. I heard another hinge break, and I pulled myself out. I had cuts all over my body, but I didn't stop. I ran towards the front yard and pulled out my bike. I heard her running to the front door, and I could hear her screaming before I left. Come back. I won't kill you." I didn't look back. I raced the bike faster than I ever had in my entire life. My vision was blurring. I had lost so much blood. But I reached the police station. Looking at my state, they decided to help. The police left for my house, and medical aid was provided to me. On my insistence, the police took me with them to my house, but my sister wasn't there anymore. I told them about the shower, and to their shock, when they opened the water tank, there lay the lifeless body of my sister. The water had turned red, and the scene when they pulled out her body still gave me nightmares. Pieces of her hands and legs were missing, as if they had been cut off. If my sister was already dead, who was the person I was living with this entire time? I stayed in the police station that day, telling them what I had witnessed and explaining the entire situation to them. After they examined her body, and the results came out after a little while, the police informed me that the first time she had been cut was 7 days before. My mind froze. I couldn't breathe. I remember falling after hearing that. The very thought revolted me. What had I done? The police kept calling me for over a month. At this time, I was at a hospital recovering from what had happened. I left my job because I couldn't focus on anything right now, and I planned on leaving this town. The police were still trying to find out what had caused this entire mess, but it seemed as if that thing just disappeared after that day. We checked at her university, but apparently she wasn't close to anyone, and some people even witnessed her being bullied. "I'm your sister. Why won't you talk to me?" These words cut me like a knife, even though I know it wasn't my sister who said those words. I don't know what the fuck that thing was, but I wish I had talked to her. My family blamed me for what happened, and I didn't fight back because somewhere or another I did feel responsible for what happened. I wish I had paid more attention to her. Growing up in a small, quaint town, I never expected to uncover a mystery that would unravel the very fabric of reality. It all began with a peculiar incident that nobody seemed to notice but me. One dreary afternoon, I noticed a glitch in the town's rhythm. A flock of birds froze mid-flight, a dog paused mid-stride, and the tick-tock of the town clock ceased. It was as if time itself had stuttered. The oddity lasted for mere seconds, but it lingered in my mind, unsettling and inexplicable. Days passed, and the glitch began occurring more frequently. Each time, the world around me froze, and I remained the sole witness. It was as though I had become an anomaly in a loop of paused time, unable to grasp the reason behind this surreal occurrence. Desperate for answers, I delved into the town's history, seeking any clue that might explain this temporal anomaly. Hidden in the local library's archives, I stumbled upon a forgotten legend about a time-altering artifact rumored to be buried beneath the town square. The legend spoke of a pocket watch, said to possess the power to control time. It was believed that an old clockmaker crafted it in the 1800s, but its whereabouts had been lost to time itself. Some whispered that the watch was cursed, while others dismissed it as mere folklore. Intrigued, I scoured the town square, examining every nook and cranny for any sign of the rumored artifact. Finally, in an overlooked corner obscured by overgrown vegetation, I unearthed a weathered pocket watch, its ornate design confirming its antiquity. As I touched the watch, a surge of energy coursed through me, and the world froze in a mesmerizing stillness. But this time, I felt a strange sense of control over the suspended reality. The watch seemed to respond to my touch, allowing me to move freely while the world remained halted. Experimenting with the watch's peculiar power, I found that by adjusting its hands, I could manipulate time within the town. However, with each alteration, the glitches grew more frequent and unpredictable. Days folded into each other, seasons clashed, and the town's timeline spiraled into chaos. I realized the danger of my newfound ability. I attempted to return the watch to its resting place, hoping to undo the disruptions I'd caused. But the moment I placed the watch back in its spot, an unsettling truth unraveled. The watch wasn't the cause of the anomalies. It was merely a conduit. The true source of the temporal disturbances was within me. Somehow, I had absorbed the watch's power, and its effects were now an intrinsic part of my existence. I was the living embodiment of the time loop, unable to escape the cycle that I inadvertently triggered. I had become the keeper of a fractured reality, perpetually stuck in a loop where time ebbed and flowed at my unknowing command. Trapped in this eternal recurrence, I now wander the town, a ghostly observer in a world that exists in fractured moments, forever haunted by the unintended consequences of my fateful discovery. Laundry day was both the best and the worst day of the week. Worst because my family produced an inhuman amount of laundry, which was solely my responsibility to deal with, and best because I got to spend a couple of hours with my two best friends in the whole world, Shay and Lynn. I'd push and pummel my family's laundry into two of those big, flimsy-looking canvas bags, then huff and puff my way up the hill to the laundromat on Main Street. I was usually joined halfway by Shay, who was as small and frail as a child half her age, wearing two huge and ratty backpacks on her front and back. Lynn was always there first, being the organized one. By the time we got there, she'd be sorting clothes into piles, with one headphone wedged in her ear, blasting study notes loud enough to drown out the omnipresent hum, bang, and clatter of the machines. Unlike my family, and Lynn's family wasn't poor. They were just super tight with money and knew the laundromat owners, so they got a discount. It made more sense for their youngest daughter to lug all their clothes 3 blocks and wash them than to buy a machine and use their water to do them at home. I guess there was also some kind of disciplinarian aspect to it, like making sure Lynn knew her place as the dutiful daughter. But Lynn herself never talked about that. Of course, she'd never tell her folks that she enjoyed it, because then they'd probably take the chore away from her. Lynn also made a point of never talking about or scrutinizing our clothes. My brother's clothes usually stank of accumulated sweat from their obsessive sporting exploits and could generously be described as borderline threadbare. There was also the knitted monstrosities Mom had made for all of us since we were born. They came in an eye-watering array of cheap colors: socks, sweaters, beanies, anything you can picture in itchy wool. And all of them carried Mom's dire warning to wash and dry on the much longer cool settings, or they would shrink. I'd never been bold enough to test this. I'd already endured enough bullying at school because of her clothing choices for me. I didn't need shrunken added to the sad list of adjectives used to describe my skin chick. As for Shay, her family's income was inversely proportionate to the number of kids they had. Threadbare in this instance would have been an overly generous description of their earthly garments, which her mother insisted just highlighted how lavishly clothed their souls were, or something like that. I often reflected on how it was a shame that this apparent spiritual richness didn't translate into a full belly, because if Shay hadn't been notorious for hanging around the trash cans at school to nab any decent, uneaten food, you would have accused her of being anorexic. I was constantly amazed she had the energy to carry all her family's clothes, let alone go through the rigmarole of washing them too. Anyway, despite our diverse backgrounds, laboring at our weekly chore had meant we'd quickly become friends. We made sure our washing days always synced up. It was a couple of hours free from any other people or responsibilities. So there we sat together in the weirdly liminal space of the Main Street laundromat, talking shit and watching clothes circle in the massive industrial washers and dryers. Like I said, it was the best day of the week. Or at least it had been, until we found the note. Lynn spotted it as she opened one of the still warm dryers. The paper creased, frayed around the edges from its ordeal inside the machine, but the ink was bone dry, unsmeared. She carefully unfolded the note to read it, and I peered over her shoulder while I set yet another 10 minutes on my cool cycle. Probably someone's lost homework, she joked. They should probably check and return it to them. Day's untidy mop of blonde appeared over Lynn's other shoulder. Yikes, if it is homework, it'd be kinder to throw it away. That handwriting alone is going to get the kid a failure. I was the fastest reader of the three of us. The library is the least expensive hangout in our town, and I scanned it at a glance. That's not homework, I told them. Spreading the note flat on one of the folding counters, Lynn adjusted her glasses with one businesslike finger and began to read aloud. her voice only audible over the heavy hum of endlessly revolving machinery. To anyone ever finding this note, I've discovered something wonderful. Riches beyond wild dreaming are mine, and I wish to share the fortune. Geez, are we being telemarketers by a fucking washing machine note? I quipped under my breath. Shay admonished. Lynn pursed her mouth, then continued louder. I wish to share the fortune. I did not believe it at first, but there is a world on the other side of these machines. Don't ask how I discovered it. This is not a happy story, but I discovered yes, I did. If you go inside the machine after midnight, it will take you to another place. Strange place, many lost clothes and things, but also lost money. Pile and pile of coins, old coins, and a new coin in a big heap like snow, all clean and shining polish from the machine trip. I have taped one coin to the note for you to examine. It shows my story in real life. Friend, I big hope you find fortune also. There's no coin, Lynn said, disappointed, touching the rough patch where Scotch tape had ripped off the bottom of the note. One sec sigh replied, and she hoisted her skinny legs easily into the mouth of the dryer. After a few moments, her pink, pimpled face peered out, then broke into a slow smile as she held out a gleaming silver coin, easily overlooked against the shiny steel of the drum's interior. That looks old, I said. Old, and maybe valuable, Lynn posited, taking a photo and then immediately opening a browser on her phone. It didn't take long to verify that the coin was from around 1920, somewhat rare, and that a specimen could fetch somewhere between $40 and $200 at auction, depending on the condition. Shay's pale blue eyes seemed all shiny coin themselves, glowing at this information. Can we put it up on eBay? She said breathlessly, like split it 3 ways. I glanced askance at Lynn. She half nodded and half shrugged, refolding the note. Sure, I don't see why not. I mean, technically, you found the coin, Shay, so it's up to you. Shay gave a little whoop of joy and punched the air with the coin in her fist. In the excitement of it all, we virtually forgot about the incredible claim on the note. The silver coin, real silver. It turned out sold 2 weeks later. The week after that, we met up at the laundromat to divvy up the spoils. The auction capped out at $88, and Lynn, the only one with access to her bank account, reverently passed Shay and me a crisp new $20 bill, plus a $5 bill each. Now, if you two can keep an eye on my load, I'll go buy us ice cream, she declared, and we readily agreed. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in our regular spot, watching our family's dirty clothes slap and bang inside the big machines, blissfully eating our treats. Shay picked at the corner of the faux leather cushioning on her seat, where the ancient yellow foam had started to come through. You know, I could get used to this, she said, eyeing the nibbled down stub of her cone. I mean, yeah, I agreed. But what are the chances we ever find another coin like that? That peculiar light entered Shay's eyes again, and she stared at me with unnerving intensity. Come on, you both know what I'm thinking. Lynn shook her head definitely, matter of fact. No, it was either a prank or it was some schizophrenic asshole who randomly found a vintage coin somewhere. There is no fucking way you are climbing into a clothes dryer after midnight to look for a mystical laundry dimension full of collectible coins. I could still feel the sharp-edged crispness of the newly minted $20 bill as Lynn pressed it into my palm. That feeling, for me, had been borderline magical. For Shay, it must have been mind-blowing. Shay nodded morosely, then stuffed the end of the cone in her mouth, closing her eyes and grunting contentedly as she crunched. But I had to wonder if those eyes, beneath their thin lids, still shone with that same pale and feverish light. We didn't notice anything hugely different about Shay at school, except that she seemed happier, hung out with us a bit more, and spent less time hanging around the trash for free sandwiches. I don't know why I assumed that was because she'd been eking out her $25. The girl had all the poor impulse control that I had, and I'd blown all my share in 2 days. Lynn was the smart one who was good with money and such. Shay and I joked she'd probably invested it and had already doubled her windfall. Maybe I fooled myself into thinking that I didn't see the weird long bruises across Shay's shins, like nothing that had never been there before, or that one day she arrived at school with a swelling bump on the side of her head and was vague all day, unable to focus or pay attention. I mean, she was happy even that day. She's happier than I've ever seen her. The first red flag was when she didn't turn up for laundry day. This happens sometimes with one of us. Someone would be sick or have other plans. Sometimes family stuff was going on, but we'd always let the others know via EM. I did know Wi-Fi access was a bit spotty for Shay, but she'd always make an effort to let us know if she wasn't coming, even if it meant sending one of her multitude of siblings to tell us. Now, Lynn and I weren't dumb. We suspected exactly what you did. That Shay had been sneaking out at midnight to climb into the industrial dyers and look for coinage. The existence of the note, that first rare coin, Shay's subsequently full stomach, her general demeanor of happiness. It all pointed to the idea that maybe she had found a way into some liminal space inside the laundromat where lost things accumulated. What about her injuries? Lynn asked. What if she's like being abused by someone for money? As in like sex work or something. I responded, incredulous. I don't know, sure. Maybe kinky stuff. It's a more plausible explanation. Occam's razor and all that. I knew Lynn didn't want to discuss the note. She didn't believe. She couldn't. And I'm not certain I did either. I tried to be as logical as Lynn always was. What if the note and the coin just gave us enough doubt for her to do something else? To let her do whatever else it is that she's doing, but to let us think she's going to some stupid laundry pocket dimension. Lynn nodded. Maybe yeah, but it still doesn't explain where she is. I'll check on my way home. Stop in at her house. Okay, cool. Let me know what you find out. Shah's mother, a harassed-looking woman in her late 40s with a newborn on one breast, told me she hadn't seen her for probably about a day. Questioning the three brothers she shared a room with proved more fruitful. They claimed they hadn't seen her for 2 nights. Her mother was loath to call the cops and report her missing. Even after I told her, I knew it had been long enough to worry. After I had a brief text exchange with Lynn, Lynn convinced her parents to call the police and report our friend as a missing person. We waited for 2 more anxious days before both Lynn and I were contacted to come into the local station to answer some questions. The police officer was a woman and she was nice, offering us tea or coffee. She broke the news gently but plainly. Shay's body had been found. Her mother had been informed, and they were in the process of releasing the information, whatever that meant. She asked us a few questions about Shay's state of mind and her home life, then said she would try to answer any questions we had. I was shell-shocked, but Lynn stayed composed. Where did you find her? She asked. The officer's expression was genuinely sympathetic. In the Main Street laundromat. A woman doing her laundry late last night found the body. Shay? Inside one of the dryers. The 1-2 from the right on the back wall, I said, barely audible. Yes, that exact one, the cop said, incredulous and slightly suspicious. How did you know that? Lynn's eyes were huge now. Do you have pictures? The woman shook her head and said, look, the images are quite disturbing. It certainly isn't suitable for you to view them. His voice became a flat buzzing sound in the background as I imagined what had happened. A kid at school once told me, with gruesome boyish relish in the details, about how his toddler brother had put their kitten inside the dryer at their house. Their mother heard an ungodly banging inside the machine and opened it to check, but it was too late. The cat was inside, wedged and tangled in white sheets, smelling of cooked blood. The poor animal was still just barely alive when they pulled it out, pink froth bubbling from its nose and mouth and the huge, swollen purple slug of its tongue blocking the airway. Its body convulsed for minutes in the miserable throes of death until it finally expired, stiff-legged, on the spattered linoleum. Yes, in fact, there was something odd. I emerged from the memory to hear the policewoman answering Lynn. What? I managed. What did you say? and the woman gave me a sharper look. There was something odd about the situation. Very odd. "Well," Lynn prompted. The officer sighed, then passed us a photo as if it were against her better judgment. Her pockets and her backpack were full of these. "We think that likely contributed to her death. The weight of them inside the machine may well have knocked her unconscious. The coroner will judge whether the heat, the battering, or both were the ultimate cause of death." I already knew what the photo would show, and so did Lynn, but we looked anyway. Piles and piles of coins. Many are identifiably old, even from the perspective of the photo, where they might have been little drifts of silvery snow. Laundry day isn't the same anymore. Lynn and I have a new place. Neither of our parents let us go back to the Main Street laundromat after the incident. Now we meet at a smaller, dingy place, 6 inconvenient blocks away. We don't talk about Shay. We both know what happened, and we both stayed tight-lipped knowing the cops wouldn't believe us, or believe the note. I believe it now, though. So, every night, Lynn and I take a picture of ourselves in our bedrooms after midnight and send it to each other. We're sort of in each other's consciences now, because otherwise, Shay died for nothing. I don't know about Lynn, but whenever I start to think about the note, it feels impossible that I won't go back to the Main Street laundromat. Wouldn't you want to see for yourself?